Everyone talks about Mars, but what about Venus? Close your eyes and imagine a space colony. Which planet did you see? Most likely, a red, dusty, rocky surface. Maybe a domed city sitting on it. Mars, right? Of course, Mars, because Mars is the rock star of space exploration. From Elon Musk to NASA, from science fiction novels to Hollywood movies. But here's something interesting. Right next door, much closer to us, another neighbor is quietly waiting. Venus, the most neglected, most misunderstood, and perhaps most unpalace. Now stop and think for a moment. Why does everyone say Mars? Why is Venus never on the table? The answer to this question is probably far less scientific and far more cultural than you think. Why is Mars the hero and Venus forgotten? Mars has become more than a planet. It has become a brand. I'm serious. In the Disney Plus movie, The Martian, Matt Damon struggles to survive by growing potatoes. On Netflix, in the series Away, an astronaut says goodbye to their family and goes to Mars. On Twitter, Elon Musk talks about his dream of sending 1 million people to Mars, and millions of people retweet it. Children's books tell stories about exploring Mars. In video games, we build Mars colonies. There's even a song on Spotify called Life on Mars. Venus. Venus is usually a footnote. Yeah, too hot, toxic clouds. Let's move on. This is not a coincidence. Mars' popularity is the result of decades of cultural storytelling. In the 1950s, science fiction writers imagined Mars as a world full of life. Ray Bradbury built Martian cities in The Martian Chronicles. H.G. Wells had Martians invade Earth, and society absorbed these ideas. Mars became that planet in our collective imagination. Venus always remained the other planet. Feminine, mysterious, unreachable, and eventually forgotten. But here's the important part. This perception is based on stories, not science. How did Mars become an official target? In 1989, US President George H.W. Bush stood up and said, "We will go to Mars." This wasn't a dream, it was a policy. NASA shifted its budgets toward Mars. Research projects became Mars-focused. Rovers were designed, launched, and drove across the Martian surface. Every new discovery became a headline. Water found on Mars. Organic molecules on Mars. The media cycle started and never stopped. In the 2000s, China joined in. Old Cold War dynamics resurfaced. Who would build the first settlement? Who would plant the flag? And so Mars became not just a scientific goal, but a geopolitical prestige symbol. There was also the Mars One scandal. Remember that? In 2012, a Dutch entrepreneur launched a one-way ticket to Mars project. Thousands of people applied. They plan to turn it into a reality show. Of course, nothing happened. The project collapsed. But something important had already occurred. The world had seriously discussed Mars colonization as a real possibility. The media went crazy. Everyone was talking about Mars, Venus. Nobody sold one-way tickets to Venus because Venus didn't look marketable. Venus might actually be easier now. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you from a logistical perspective. Venus may make more sense than Mars. Yes, you heard that right. Let's start with distance. Venus is much closer to Earth than Mars. On average, about 41 million kilometers. Mars, about 225 million kilometers. That's not just a number. That's travel time. A trip to Mars takes 6 to 9 months. To Venus, about 3 to 4 months. Nearly half the time. Now think about this. Every day spent in space means astronauts are exposed to radiation. Cosmic rays bombard the body. Cancer risk increases. Muscle loss begins. Bones weaken. Psychological stress builds up. Shorter travel time means less risk. Let's also look at launch windows. To go to Mars, there's an ideal launch opportunity, roughly every 26 months. For Venus, about every 19 months. More frequent opportunities mean more flexible planning. And cost. Cost is the foundation of everything. Shorter trips mean less fuel. Less fuel means cheaper missions. Cheaper missions mean more missions. But nobody talks about this because Venus isn't cool. There is no Amazon in space. This is a critical point. Space colonization is not an Amazon delivery. You must bring everything with you. Every screw, every wrench, every spare part, every box of food, every liter of water. All of it must be launched thousands of kilometers upward inside a rocket. And sending anything to space is incredibly expensive. Tens of thousands of dollars per kilogram. You're going to Mars. You're traveling for 9 months. During that time, you must carry food, water, and oxygen for the crew. 9 months there. Let's say you stay on the surface for 500 days. Then 9 months back. Nearly 3 years of logistics. You're going to Venus. 4 months there. Same surface stay. 4 months back. Less than 2 years of logistics. Do you see the difference? Less transport, lighter spacecraft, lower cost, safer journey, and one more reality. If something goes wrong, returning from Venus is much faster. An emergency return from Mars, impossible. You must wait for the launch window. In a crisis, that can mean death. From Venus, return windows are more frequent. Distances are shorter. Energy requirements are lower. But again, these are technical details. They don't excite the public. Mars is more cool. Solar energy, atmosphere, Protection. Venus has another advantage: its proximity to the Sun. Mars is farther from the Sun. That means lower efficiency for solar panels. As strong as on Earth, you need massive panels or nuclear reactors. Both are expensive and risky. Venus. Closer to the Sun. Solar energy is more than double Earth's. Panels can be smaller and more efficient. Energy is the lifeblood of colonization. Venus is rich in it. Then there's the atmosphere. Mars' atmosphere is extremely thin, less than 1% of Earth's pressure. That means almost no radiation protection. Meteors hit the surface directly. Pressure differences are dangerous for the human body. Venus. Thick, dense atmosphere. Yes, very dense, but it filters cosmic radiation. Radiation levels are much lower. Meteors burn up before reaching the surface. It's like a natural shield. Of course, Venus' atmosphere is full of sulfuric acid clouds. That's another issue. But we're talking about protection mechanisms, and Venus is far better than Mars in this regard. Mars' silent disaster. Now let's talk about Mars' biggest, most hidden, least discussed problem: gravity. Mars' gravity is 38% of Earth's. That might sound harmless. We'll just feel lighter. No, this is a serious disaster. The human body evolved in Earth gravity. Our bones, muscles, cardiovascular system, internal organs, everything is shaped by 1G. On Mars, that balance breaks. If you live on Mars long term, your bones literally lose density. On the International Space Station, astronauts lose about 1 to 2% of bone density per month. That's in microgravity. A person living on Mars for years may return to Earth with osteoporosis-like conditions, fragile bones, weak muscles, a heart that struggles to adapt to Earth's gravity. Worse, children. How would a child born on Mars develop? We don't know. But predictions are bleak. In low gravity, the skeletal system may not fully develop. A child who grows up on Mars and then tries to come to Earth might not even be able to stand. This is a fatal obstacle to colonization. Mars cannot be humanity's second home, because people born there may never be able to return to Earth. Venus. Gravity is about 90% of Earth's, almost the same. Your body barely notices the difference. Bones stay strong. Muscles remain healthy. Children develop normally, and returning to Earth is possible. This isn't about comfort. It's about survival. Some things cannot be fixed. Mars dreams usually end with terraforming. We'll add an atmosphere, create oceans, make it green. Science fiction vision. But the reality is, some things cannot be changed. You can add atmosphere, Theoretically, massive factories, centuries of work, trillions of dollars, maybe, but you cannot change gravity. Physics does not allow it. Mars' gravity is 38%, period. So, even if Mars is terraformed, humans living there will still face bone loss. Future generations will be unable to return to Earth. Mars becomes a trap. You go there, but you're stuck there. This also creates an ethical problem. Mars colonists would be condemning their own children to a planet. Those children might grow up and ask, "Why did you bring me here?" Venus doesn't have this problem. Gravity is already compatible. Even without terraforming, humans can physically adapt. The obsession with touching the ground. Let me introduce a concept: surface obsession. When it comes to planets, humanity is obsessed with the surface. Planting flags, walking on soil. This symbolism runs deep. When Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, what did he say? One small step for man. Step, foot, surface. Mars fits this narrative. You walk on red soil. You've sent robots. Now you send humans. Photos. We conquered Mars, Venus. You can't land on the surface. This creates a psychological barrier. If I can't walk there, what's the point? But this is purely cultural bias. Why must colonization happen on a surface? Why does it require a flag ceremony? Living in space can take many forms. Is humanity ready to accept that? Probably not. But maybe it has to learn. Why can't we land? Let's talk about Venus reality. Because, yes, Venus is brutal. Surface temperature is around 450 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to melt lead, more than twice the temperature of a pizza oven. No electronics can function. Metals soften, plastics vaporize. Atmospheric pressure is 90 times Earth's, equivalent to being 900 meters underwater. The depth where submarines are crushed. On Venus's surface, pressure would slowly crush you. The atmosphere is 96% carbon dioxide. No oxygen. You can't breathe. And even if you could, the clouds are sulfuric acid. They would burn your skin. The Soviet Union sent probes to Venus in the 60s and 70s. The Venera program. Engineering masterpieces, armored, cooled, extremely tough. They landed. And the longest lasting ones survived. 2 hours. 2 hours. Then they melted, were crushed, and died. Venus' surface is literally hell. More hostile than Dante's Inferno. That's why nobody dreams of walking on Venus. Because you can't. You die. The habitable layer of Venus. But here comes the biggest twist. Venus' surface is hell. True. But go 50 kilometers up, and everything changes. At about 50 to 60 kilometers altitude, pressure is similar to Earth. 1. Atmosphere. Temperature between 20 degrees Celsius and 70 degrees Celsius. Habitable range. Stop for a second. Think about what this means. It means that in Venus's atmosphere, there is the most Earth-like environment outside our planet. Mars' surface, minus 60 degrees Celsius, 1% of Earth pressure. Moon, vacuum. Titan, minus 180 degrees Celsius. But Venus, atmosphere. You could wear a hoodie. Scientists call this cloud layer colonization. The idea: build gigantic balloons. These float in Venus' atmosphere. Inside them are living spaces. Humans live there. Sounds crazy. At first, yes. But think about it. We already live in an atmosphere. On Earth, we're also floating in air. The only difference is that Venus has no solid ground beneath us. The balloons would be filled with oxygen and nitrogen. This mixture is lighter than Venus' carbon dioxide atmosphere, so the balloons naturally float. No extra energy needed. No helicopter blades. You simply drift, and solar energy is abundant. Radiation is filtered by the thick atmosphere. No meteor danger. Homes, gardens, communities. A civilization living among the clouds. It sounds like fantasy, but it's a NASA concept. This is not a dream. In 2014, NASA published a concept called HAVOC, High Altitude Venus Operational Concept. HAVOC proposed permanent human colonies in Venus' atmosphere. Exactly the idea described above. Giant balloons, living modules, cities floating at 50 kilometers altitude. NASA engineers calculated feasibility, tested material durability, simulated atmospheric dynamics. Result: technically possible. The project didn't move forward because the budget went to Mars. Political support went to Mars. Media attention went to Mars. But HAVOC still exists in archives as a possibility. The Soviets also discussed similar ideas in the 1970s after Venera. Maybe we shouldn't focus on Venus's surface, but its atmosphere. But the Cold War ended. The program was canceled. Now, a new generation of researchers is revisiting the idea. Private companies are showing interest. Scientific papers are being published. Venus is slowly returning to the conversation, still in Mars' shadow. Maybe one day we'll even plant a flag if Venus cloud colonies become reality. Something interesting could happen. Over time, technology improves. Materials become stronger. Cooling systems advance. And one day, maybe symbolically, a team could descend to Venus' surface. For a few minutes, plant a flag, take photos, and leave. Then maybe society will be satisfied. Okay, we've stepped on Venus too. Now we can take it seriously. Absurd. Yes. But that's how human psychology works. In the long term, Venus colonization could follow a different path. Atmospheric cities grow, expand. Maybe one day, projects to slowly transform the atmosphere begin. It takes centuries. But Venus gradually cools. Pressure drops. And in the far future, descendants of our descendants might walk naturally on Venus' surface. Or maybe they'll continue living in the atmosphere. Maybe surface will stop being important. Humanity redefines itself. We don't only live on rocks, we can live in skies. That would be a paradigm shift. Which one is better? Okay. Now, let me ask you a question. 2 options. First, Mars, 9-month journey. Bone loss, radiation, but you can walk on the surface. You can plant a flag, feel red soil. Second, Venus, 4-month journey. Thick atmosphere, protection. Earth-like gravity, abundant solar energy. Habitable temperature and pressure. But you float in the clouds. You can't walk on the surface. Which would you choose? Be honest. What does your first instinct say? Mars, because it feels familiar. Because you've seen it in movies. Because Elon Musk said so. Or Venus, because it makes logistical sense. Because it's healthier for humans. Because science says so. This is where culture and science collide. Maybe the answer is both. Maybe we go to Mars for exploration, to Venus to live. Research bases on Mars, colonies on Venus. 2 planets, 2 purposes. Or maybe we shouldn't go to either yet. Maybe we should fix Earth first. Climate crisis, hunger, wars. Maybe billions of dollars should go to this planet, not others. But that's another debate. For now, I'll say this. Venus does not get the attention it deserves. It was ignored because of surface obsession, forgotten because of cultural narratives, defunded because of political choices. But science is quietly there. Data, calculations, concepts. And one day, maybe after a crisis, maybe after a discovery, humanity will look at Venus again and say, why didn't we think of this sooner? When that day comes, I hope it's not too late.